Hey Kev, let's follow this trail over here. This looks like there might be something waiting down there.
All right. Hey, wait a minute. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I thought it was just me. What the heck is that?
I don't know what that is. Whoa, do you smell that too?
That's unbelievable. Hey, look.
What the?
Hey, look, those branches are moving over there.
What the heck is that?
Holy cow, is that what I think it is? Look at that thing.
Oh my God.
It's a freaking Sasquatch. Welcome to the Bigfoot, Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters podcast. My name is W.J. Sheehan, and I am the author of the series of books, Bigfoot, Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. 39 volumes available in paperback, ebook, Kindle, and audiobook. So half of them are audiobooks. And I encourage you to go out, get a couple of copies, enjoy the listen, enjoy the read. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in there. And before I continue here, let me bring my brother right in. I got a couple of things I want to say. KJ, my co-host, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Bill. How's things on your side?
Very good. You know, I wanted to open something up here just for a moment. Let's consider this a piece of our other oddities and have a little discussion with you and the audience listening in, get some feedback from them. You know, we now have an American Pope.
Yeah.
And you remember kind of giving me the thumbs up like you called that one, Bill. Philip did the same thing. Now, what I want to discuss momentarily is this type of thing happens as I get older and looking back, which is one of the benefits of aging. You could look back and see a track record, so to speak, or compare apples with apples as the years go on. This type of thing happens with me all the time, where something is thrown up in front of me in a moment in time, and something clicks inside of me like, walk this way. You need to do this. It's an internal voice that just kind of speaks to me, and I'm like locked into it. It happens periodically, and it happened when I was hearing just a side speech on like a news broadcast while I was working around the house, and some woman said, well, there's this one outlier, a cardinal. They were talking about who were the potential candidates for Pope. And she said there's this outlier, Cardinal so-and-so from Chicago area. And immediately something said to me, this man will be the next Pope.
And that's strange. See, like I have a similar thing, but I hear Aerosmith play Walk This Way. No, but seriously, what's interesting is that they were talking about him as the cardinal from Chicago, because the guy is also, he's definitely born in America, born in Chicago.
Right.
But he spent most of his life in Peru, and he's
Correct.
a Peruvian citizen as well. So
that's correct.
It's kind of an interesting mix. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's not like he was the cardinal of a church here in the United States, right?
Right.
Which is it's kind of odd.
The interesting thing is, we'll get back to it. The most recent thing that just happened was kind of bears witness to what you or I were talking about relative to the podcast page. And I don't want to let anything out to the audience yet about what I'm going to be doing there. But that came out of a conversation, and I got in my spirit, you need to do this. This is why you're hearing this. You need to do this. And then I, of course, called up Casey, had some conversations with her, and I told you what I was planning to do. So I expect that to be very successful.
A cliffhanger.
Yeah. Now, getting back to the Pope, I was listening to the Fox News broadcast, which was covering that gathering in Rome for hours.
The conclave, you mean?
Not the conclave. It was the day he was going to be introduced as Pope.
Oh, you mean all the people just gathering in St. Peter's Square?
The smoke had gathered. We knew there was going to be a new Pope. The white smoke came out, and this was the marching Swiss Guard, the band, the people, the cheering. And all of a sudden he came out on that balcony. Now, my belief is this. That single event. Now, I know people don't like me talking politics or whatnot, and I don't care. I'm talking about something very strange that goes on in my life, and I'm sharing with all of you exactly as I get it and how I feel about it. When that Pope came out, the Cardinal came out before him, and he was speaking in Italian over this roaring crowd, announcing what I guess was the man's real name and then the name that he had chosen as Pope, which was Leo XIV.
Yep.
Now, I couldn't understand what the man said, and I was uncertain as to what the American's name actually was. And I was like, well, geez, I know this guy's supposed to be the American. And, well, then the commentator from Fox or whatever who was doing the interpretation said the Pope's name, and he's an American. And I almost fell on my knees on the rug in the living room because I couldn't believe that once again I had even told people about this guy being the next Pope. And they looked at me like I had four heads. And all the front runners that were being spoken about, especially down to the wire, were like three guys from the European continent. And here's this American Pope, Kev.
Yeah, now, I mean, I was skeptical when you told me weeks ago.
Sure.
That it would be in America. Because, I mean, I travel the world so much.
Right.
I have a different perspective. I'm not anti-American people, so don't write in. But I have a different perspective of America from the rest of the world. And, the rest of the world doesn't really look at us positively, generally. Right. And I don't mean because of the current president or anything like that. I just mean generally. Right. They don't look at the United States too favorably from the other parts of the world. And so I was like, I don't know. And then when I first heard it was American, I was like, something's wrong here. How could this happen? But then I realized, all kidding aside, I was like, something's wrong. What the heck happened there? Yeah. And again, not that I'm against it. Again, don't write in about this. Listen to me. I was just like shocked by it. But then when I read about, Pope Leo, I was like, okay, this makes more sense. Like, one, that he was hand-selected by Pope Francis, right? And he was given the opportunity that he had in Peru, to be the cardinal. Mm-hmm. And he was cares very much for the poor, very similar to Francis. But he's viewed to be a little bit more of a moderate than Francis. And I loved Pope Francis, so, I didn't need a change for me, but I did love the fact that he's, much more or very much in the following of Pope Francis. And, and then, but when he came out on the balcony, you could see he's more moderate in that, just in what he was wearing. He was wearing the traditional garb of the Pope, where Pope Francis never did that. He was kind of like, I don't need the little cool red shoes and stuff like that. I'm not royalty. Mm-hmm. I'm here to spread the word of Jesus Christ.
There is something to be said, though, about the pomp, the splendor, and the Senate. Now, for those who are unlearned, at one time...
hey, wait a minute. I am clearly unlearned.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm into this stuff like I'm into the Bigfoot and everything else. When I bite into something, I take a whole bite. Now, there was a time when this was a monarchy. So all of the pomp and splendor and the marching bands and everything comes forward hundreds and hundreds of years from when this was like a monarchy of
Even
sorts.
1,000 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, way back. But at any rate, but it's not that way anymore. But they've kept up with all of the ceremony and whatnot, and there's a lot to be said about that. It's really a thing of beauty. It's something you don't see anywhere else in the world. Now, let's get back to why I even brought this up. So I asked the audience, and I ask you, Kev. Everybody frowned, and even if they didn't tell me, when I told them this American is going to be the next pope, emphatically, just like that, it's going to be. They probably thought I was a horse's ass, or Bill's a blowhard, or whatever they thought, or impossible. When it happened, and all of these other things in my life looking back, roads I've taken, even starting to write the Bigfoot books. What do you make of that? Where is that coming from? Because now I have a track record to look back on of not only picking the American Pope, but many, many other things, and not one of them did not happen. What do you make of that? Where does that come from as an oddity in life? I am sure there are other people out there listening right now that experience the same thing I do. And I'm not saying hundreds of thousands of people, but I am sure there are people that experience the same thing I'm talking about. What do you make of that, Kevin?
Yeah, I don't know, Bill. I mean, you got to be more specific, I think. Like, can you tell me who's going to win the Stanley Cup?
It's a random event.
Oh, I don't know.
It's totally out of the blue. I wasn't asking to hear that this American's going to be the Pope. It just happened.
Okay, I don't know.
And it was something that I'm locked into. I identify with that. Right, we all have thoughts, right? There's thousands and thousands of thoughts and visuals running through our minds every day. Even in our sleep, we've got dreams. But this is very specific, and I recognize it in the moment that, oh, this is that again, and I need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, no idea. No idea.
It's interesting, though, isn't it?
It is.
But let's move on from that, Kev. Slide into your other oddities segment.
The other oddities.
The other oddities.
I promise, folks, this will not involve the Pope, Catholicism, or politics. You had your dose for the day. So, Bill, this one, I know you know about it. You know that I'm not going to talk about it today. But you sent me the tip, and it's about 10 years old. But it's interesting, and it's in your backyard. So I had to bring it up. So this, folks, we've been up in the sky looking at UFOs and UAPs and all that stuff the past handful of episodes from my side in Bigfoot in the News and other other oddities in the news, cryptids in the news and other oddities, easy for me to say. And now we're going to the hairy man again. And this story appeared in February 11th of 2015. So again, like 10 years ago, of an alleged Bigfoot sighting on Long Island.
Yeah, very
where
bizarre.
My brother lives. Mm-hmm. And this is in a town called Glen Cove, out on Long Island. And Glen Cove, if you think of Long Island as like the outline of a fish with its tail facing east and its head in towards Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And Glen Cove is on the north shore, so on the top side of the fish, so to speak, and heading in pretty close to New York City. So it's a very populous place, but a very beautiful area and kind of an exclusive and fancy schmancy area. Like there's a bunch of old estates in that way from folks like Wrigley that came up with Wrigley chewing gum and stuff like that. Yeah. And this place in Glen Cove where it was seen several times is called Garvey's Point Preserve, which, Bill, I never heard of before. Did you?
I didn't either, but I don't frequent that area, so I
Right.
wouldn't be. I've done some siding on houses years ago in Glen Cove, but we were just going to job sites and taking care of business and getting out
Yeah,
of there.
yeah. And I looked it up, of course, and it's on the north side of Hempstead Harbor, which is the last harbor as you're heading in towards New York City on Long Island Sound before Manhasset Bay. And you might be like, why is this guy talking about harbors? Well, remember, KJ grew up racing sailboats on Long Island Sound and still races sailboats. So I know places by their harbors and lighthouses and stuff often better than the roads. Plus, they wouldn't let me into the town of Glen Cove. I had to sail in on the water and look at it from the shore. But anyway, so it looks like this preserve, but folks, we're not talking about someplace in the Pacific Northwest. Like, there's not that many acres there. So
Yeah.
the idea of seeing something there, but this was very well covered in the news. So I'm gonna tell you this story here, okay?
All right.
So a rare Bigfoot sighting has created a stir of excitement on the North Shore of Long Island. Again, this is 10 years ago. Residents living nearby the Garvey's Point Preserve in Glen Cove, which overlooks Hempstead Harbor on Long Island Sound, have recently reported sightings of a tall, hairy creature roaming through the woods there. There have been reports of strange animal noises emanating from the preserve, as well as physical evidence in the form of footprints and oversized droppings. Just last month, Jim Conleone, a Glen Cove resident, had a close encounter with a creature in the preserve. His personal video of what he termed a true Bigfoot shows fleeting images of a large creature moving through the woods. It was about 7.5 feet tall, Conleone recalls, but it was expert at camouflaging itself in the trees. Sometimes all we would see was a pair of red eyes staring at us from the bushes. Conleone was accompanied by his friend Michael Corwin, who verified the claim. At times, we were maybe only 50 yards away, said Corwin. To be that close to something prehistoric, a missing link, as it were, is something I'll never forget. The two men tracked the creature through the preserve for over an hour until the animal displayed signs of aggressiveness, and they prudently retreated to the parking lot. Still, they were eager to return to resume their efforts. It's out there, said Conleone, and I believe it wants to make contact with us. And they reference that there is a video on YouTube under Bigfoot sighting on Long Island, and I searched for that, Bill, and I couldn't find I have videos that come up when you search on Bigfoot sighting on Long Island, but they don't match what they were talking about in this sighting. So I don't know if they took it down. Maybe YouTube took it down. Who knows?
Interesting. Now, I got to tell you, Kev, as soon as I was made aware of this, I thought of the demonic.
Well, certainly the red eyes. I mean, I got to tell you, when I first heard of it, I thought of bogus.
Yeah, well, of course, because there is nothing there. There's nothing sustainable. I mean, there's deer and squirrels running around Long Island.
And what I thought about, Bill, is maybe somebody was walking around with a suit on, because there's no guns either. Like, you're not going to get shot in the woods in Glen Cove.
No, you wouldn't get shot. But I don't know. It's such a strange thing, and certainly belongs under the title of Other Oddities.
Yeah.
Because, folks, this Glen Cove, at one time, the entire north and south shores of Long Island, in particular the north shores in what's called Nassau County, was called the Gold Coast. All of the rich heavy hitters, the Vanderbilts, Wrigley, Teddy Roosevelt had his house up there. It's still there. It's like a museum. All of these people, South Shore and North Shore, had these places, these getaways. In fact, we have the Vanderbilt Motor Parkway now, which was actually a racetrack set up by the Vanderbilts for old sports cars, those long, narrow ones you see from the early 1900s. At any rate, this area is well built up now. Now, there are some estate properties still up there, and plenty of them, with big lands and walls and iron fences around them. But there's really no place for a Bigfoot to live and hunt and thrive, and certainly not more than one Bigfoot. This thing didn't arrive alone. So I'm thinking this thing has to be from the demonic realm. It's something that was appearing over there. For what reason and why these guys were allowed to see it, I don't know.
Or a hoax.
Or a hoax.
Yeah.
Some guy stomping around in a suit. I'd like to know what this thing was doing when it was showing aggression that day.
Yeah, or don't forget the other possibility of hoax is, I mean, I don't want these two guys to come after me or anything, Congileone.
Right.
But it could be that they made the whole story up. Just saying.
Exactly. So there's several scenarios there. But just almost foolishness, unless it was being done in a comical sort of way where it was written, which I don't know. Was this a mainstream paper that carried it?
It comes up as a press release, but that could mean almost anything. So it's like, I would say, hey, there's 7-8 million people on Long Island with you. If you remember this, if you know anything about this, if you live up there and you saw this thing, contact us at BigfootTerrorInTheWoods.com under the link contact us and let us know. Like we always say, if you've seen something, say something.
Yeah, no, interesting. And there may be people out there, Kev, that will get back to us on that. Now, I'm doing a little, I'm going back a little bit. And folks, if you're new to the podcast, in the beginning we do a spot called Cryptids in the News and Other Oddities. And we can talk about really anything in there, anything odd or a cryptid or, UFOs, whatever topic Kev decides to delve into. And today I was talking about the Pope, and I really only did that because I wanted to know your opinion on what I'm hearing and why I'm hearing it, and that's why we went down that road. And then in the middle, I typically do a Bigfoot account. Most of them have come out of the volumes of my books, close to 500 of them, and occasionally I introduce a new one that's an unpublished work. In this case, I'm going back to one I did. The last time I read this one on the podcast, Kev, was 2020. So it's a good long time ago. But this is a really interesting account. And it came from a guy named Jeff Landis. Now, Jeff was formerly a resident of my home turf here, Long Island, who now lives in Pennsylvania. But what happened, as you'll see, didn't happen in Pennsylvania or Long Island. In the 70s, I was involved in the trucking business. My mainstay was hauling potatoes. And the two areas from which I hauled potatoes were Long Island and Maine. Through this work, I had developed many relationships with people in Maine. I kept in touch with these guys long after my days as a potato hauler had ended. The fellas in Maine called themselves maniacs, and with good reason. They lived a fairly secluded life up there and had embraced many hobbies to keep themselves busy. If it involved shooting, hunting, or snow, it was right up the maniac's alley. Now, four-wheeling and motocross bikes were also at the front of their entertainment menu. In other words, these dudes were doing everything that you and I want to do, but possibly can't because of where we choose to live and all of the do's and don'ts of living there. Now, Maine is a wild country, very few inhabitants, and even fewer people in law enforcement available to watch over you. I was always game for whatever the boys had up their sleeve, and they loved to show off their toys whenever I had the time to hang out with them. 30 years or so after I was done with trucking, I still went up there to hunt with them. Now, I don't recommend this to you or anybody else, but some of these boys were regularly hunting out of season. Not my place to judge them on whether or not that's right or wrong, especially since I did it with them on this particular trip. I will give them this much. Everything that they killed was eaten, and they let nothing go to waste. On this occasion, we were bow hunting for some white-tailed deer, and I had brought along my old Bar Apache 38-pound recurve bow. I won't divulge where or when we were hunting, so don't ask. What I will say is that one of the guy's families owned an enormous tract of land, which covered hundreds of acres and abutted an area that was robust with cranberries. Cranberries are one of the main agricultural products in the state, and there are a lot of animals who love to eat them. The boys had a number of locations where they would regularly set up trail cameras to keep tabs on what was moving in and out. So we hiked in to retrieve some of the data cards and see what was around for the taking. Now, if you've never been in the woods in Maine, the forest can be so dense that you could get lost 20 feet away from the road and never know the road was there. And many people can and do get lost there every year. Since these guys knew the area very well, they knew where we could find a couple of clearings in the woods. Some of them were quite small, but they were clearings nonetheless. So we made our way into the woods, taking these data cards and resetting some of the cameras which we passed along the way. And we retrieved the footage, but they were not impressed with what they saw. A lot of small females, short-antlered bucks coming and going, but nothing worth hunting. The next day, we went back and retrieved the cards from the newer areas that we had set the day before. Upon review, we saw not one but two really decent bucks coming into the clearings. One a healthy 8-pointer, the other a 10. However, while reviewing the film, we noticed something odd. There was a dark shadow that passed through the camera field of view. Now, since the cameras take still shots when triggered, and those are only taken every so many seconds, whatever the pattern is, the first shot totally obscured the lens. The second shot looked like a blurry picture of a large elbow, if you can believe it, and possibly a forearm. One of the guys said that it could have been the hind leg of a moose. All I knew was that it was a fuzzy image of something dark. The plan was that two of us were going to stake out one of the clearings, while the other two staked out the other, and we flipped a coin for the one where the 10-pointer had appeared. Next morning, we were in the woods really early. David and I were sitting with camo on and our backs up against some good foliage. I will try to describe the clearing as best as I can. Dave had told me that this was a cranberry and spruce bog. In the morning light, there was a heavy mist draped over the forest. Everything was soaking wet with dew. The clearing was oblong in shape and tightly bordered by pointy blue spruce trees that varied greatly in height. They had a staggered, misty look as they faded into the fog. The majority of the clearing was comprised of reddish golden grass that was well soaked and now slumped over. Interspersed with the grass were hundreds of baby spruce trees, as well as some other plants with bright red leaves. If my memory is correct, Bill, these were the cranberries. We sat, waited for some time. Now, my range from my bow with accuracy was probably 25 to 30 yards, maximum. I had never attempted to shoot anything further away, so something would have to come relatively close for me to hit it. That's the art of bow hunting. Everything is done quietly and at close range, especially with a recurve. About 2 hours had gone by. I'm just turning this up here a second. About 2 hours had gone by, and the mist was all but gone when a doe came into the clearing. She was about 50 yards away, but we weren't here for a doe. We were looking for the 8-pointer since we had lost the coin toss for the 10. A little while later, there were a total of 3 does eating in the clearing. They were in the grass that I spoke of earlier. which was wet and made virtually no noise as they walked about. Suddenly, off to my left, the 8-pointer buck emerged from the spruce trees. We didn't hear him coming, but he was there. He surveyed the clearing and the does within it before he began to slowly wander around, eating all the while. I was already in position for a great shot at him. I just needed to get into a crouch so I could stand up. I put my broadhead's nock on the string and slowly started to stand. I drew back on the bow and took my shot. It was a great shot at a quarter angle and went right into the organs. I couldn't believe it. The buck lurched and jumped, running into the woods. As Dave ran over and gave me a high five, telling me what a great shot it was. There was an immediate blood trail, so it shouldn't have taken long to find him. That is to say, it shouldn't have taken long for Dave to find him. If it was just me, I would have never found it. However, we got to a point where Dave said that the trail of blood stopped. He couldn't find any more. He said, "I'm certain the deer had fallen in this spot, but it wasn't there. It died, fell on the ground, and somehow disappeared. Even I could see that the area was flattened where a body had been." We looked for 3 hours and couldn't find the buck, and Dave said that this was the first time that this had ever happened to him. At a loss for words, we made our way out of the forest. Good hunters never want to leave a shot animal in the woods. That is taboo. So we met up with the other guys, and they couldn't believe what had happened to us, and they said that they had no luck with the 10-pointer either. The next day, Dave and I went to check out the place where the 10-pointer should have been. They switched, and the other guys had moved on to another location entirely. We made our way into the clearing very early. The conditions were just like the day before, misty and foggy with dew everywhere. The forest repeats itself here, being comprised of very few plant varieties, but they are abundant wherever you go. This field or opening was slightly smaller in dimensions than yesterday's clearing. Dave and I were sitting about 75 feet apart from each other, but we could see each other plainly despite our camo. Pretty much the same scenario played out for us the second day in a row. A couple of doe gradually entering, and then almost like clockwork, the 10-pointer came out of the woods. But he was about 150 feet away from Dave and over 200 feet away from me. He gradually lumbered around the clearing, and over a period of about 20 minutes, he was making his way towards my spot. Finally, he was about 35 yards out from me with his head down. I admit, I was a little antsy, but I put the arrow on the nock and stood to draw it. A doe jumped, and the buck raised his head and started to turn, and I let the arrow go as I began to jump, which was not a good move on my part. A professional would have waited longer or passed on the shot altogether, but I'm not a pro. It wasn't a terrible shot, but I think I hit the shoulder bone, seeing the arrow did not sink into the body on impact, and the buck took off. Dave asked if I had... Dave asked if I hit him. I told him I thought I hit bone. If that was what happened, we'd be tracking a wounded animal that might not fall for another few hours, if it even fell at all. However, we began to track it. Dave scoured the ground for blood. There was very little. We surveyed a number of narrow game trails through the surrounding woods, trying as best as we could to determine which way this critter might have gone. We went back and forth for over an hour, but we could not find the buck. Suddenly, Dave shouted, "Holy cow, what the hell is this mess?" We had stumbled upon a spot of the trail that was soaked in blood. Everything around this one area was trampled down, and in the middle of it all was half of a deer's leg. I couldn't tell if it was the front or the back. We couldn't understand what had happened here, and it was all very fresh. The blood still warm to the touch. And Dave said it must have been from the buck that I had hit. I didn't know as for myself. We stood there looking around in shock, and Dave began to tell me about some stories he'd heard through the years, other hunters having said their kills had been taken before they could retrieve it. But none of them knew what might have taken them. Dave walked over to the mess and reached down, picking up a piece of antler. Bears don't snap legs off and break antlers, and they sure as heck don't run away with a deer in their mouth. Later on, we met up with the other guys who managed to score a nice buck for themselves. One of the guys had said that he once found a semi-eaten day-old doe lying in the woods that had one of its legs ripped off. None of us had mentioned the name Bigfoot that day, but the thought had entered my mind years later, when I heard of animals being taken down by a Bigfoot on the hunt. We had seen almost nothing, but we had seen enough. What do you make of that one, Kev?
Well, that's a good classic Bigfoot encounter.
No Bigfoot sighted, but what do you say about what they found?
And Maine, compared to Glen Cove, there we go right there. Could find anything up in the forests of Maine.
Absolutely. Now, so there had to be, if you believe it, a Bigfoot or several Bigfoot that were watching these guys. Or we are familiar with us talking about them knowing a gun or what happens when the guys go bow hunting. That possibly some of these are even looking to watch and take advantage. You know, I was in a campground one night, Kev, and we had a cooler with hot dog buns and everything inside of it and this and that. Do you know a raccoon came across in the firelight, walked right over to the cooler, opened it up, took a pack of buns out, and walked away.
I thought you were going to say, and he fired up the grill looking at you guys and grilled up some dogs, ate about 4 himself, and threw you guys a couple.
But the point I'm making is that animals, creatures in the woods, know what's going on if they've seen it happening before.
Yeah.
You know, they can relate to the firing of a gun and perhaps seeing an animal dropping or a man gutting an animal after it was heard, you know. The first deer disappeared, like it was just gone. But he had reached a spot where he felt it had dropped, but it was taken away.
Yeah.
The second deer, in a matter of a couple of days, they find a snapped off piece of an antler, which that's got to be tough to do. And they find a half of a leg and blood all over the place, and the animal is gone.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, I don't know, man. You know, I've heard before of people saying the animal was gone or I saw something dragging it off. So they've got to know. They've got to know. But anyways, that's it, man. Crazy, crazy tale.
Cool. Good account.
Yep.
All right, you ready for some listener mail?
Absolutely. What do we got, bro?
All right. First one comes in. It says, "Hi, guys. I was excited to hear the episode from a few weeks back where a man from northern Wisconsin wrote in and talked about what I am assuming was the Chequamegon National Forest." Mm-hmm. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly.
Okay.
I grew up in that neck of the woods. Literally lots of forest. It's a tricky name to pronounce. Where I'm from, we pronounce it Shawamagen. Shawamagen. Okay, I didn't get that. I've heard it pronounced slightly differently as well, or as badly as Kevin initially. No, I added that part, of course.
Shawamagen.
It's beautiful country and definitely has an ecosystem that could support Bigfoot. I also enjoyed the story out of Minnesota, where I currently live, about the men illegally hunting and shooting Bigfoot. I grew up hearing a lot about that type of hunting called shining, where I'm from. It was done more in my childhood recollection to put food on the table than for selling pelts. At least in the circles the adults in my world were in. Being an 80s child, that brought back memories I'd long forgotten. Thanks as always for what you two do. P.S. I own a few of your books, WJ, and much like Kevin, would love to get my hands on an autographed copy. Heather.
I love that stuff, man.
All right.
You know, I was interacting with a guy the other day, and he initially had reached out saying he had never seen a Bigfoot. He still has not seen a Bigfoot. But he overheard a conversation with a guy in an area in Canada, a national park up there, who was talking about having seen a Bigfoot.
Yep.
He knew the park, he knew the area, had been there, and it just caught his ear in the moment. But it stuck with him. You know, like, well, that's interesting, you know. And sometime later, he was talking to another man. I don't remember if it was months or years later. One had nothing to do with the other. And this guy was riding his Ski-Doo. I don't know if Ski-Doo is still a snowmobile brand, but I remember them when we were younger. He was riding his Ski-Doo in the snow through this same parkland, and he's talking about it, and he remembered the area, and he said to him, hey, when you were in there snowmobiling, or when you were snowmobiling in that area, did you ever see anything in there weird or unusual? And then this guy tells him that he had seen, you know, a Sasquatch Bigfoot creature in there once that freaked him out. So it's kind of weird, Kev, how the conversations can go around. So here's a guy who overhears one and bluntly asks another guy, and both of them are claiming to have seen a Bigfoot in this national park up there.
Good stuff. I agree.
It's interesting,
strange.
You know? Yeah, yep.
But could be. Definitely could be. All right. Our last email for the week comes in from Eric. And the subject is, thanks, guys. He says, hey, guys, I'm new to the podcast, and you guys make my 9-hour truck ride fly by. Bill, my heart goes out to you as I lost my wife in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, you do one hell of a job keeping Bill on track from time to time. Part sheepdog, I guess. I grew up in upstate New York and have spent years in the woods hunting, from Fairbanks, Alaska, to Northern California and all over New York. While in Alaska, I was only 17 at the time, living with my brother. There were old-timers up there that talked of hairy man. This was in 1977. We lived at the end of a dirt road and had no phone. We spent many hours hunting and fishing. Hell, I even got lost on one hunting trip. Currently, my truck run takes me on Route 17 out of Binghamton, New York, all the way to Route 87 into New Jersey every day, then back the same way. I have a camera on the front of my truck, and I hope I catch the old hairy man boogieing across the road. I hope you do too. And so he asks, Bill, have you ever played any Ted Nugent? And I'm going to interject here because Uncle Ted is one of my favorites. And Bill, if I could have a request, I think you should learn The Great White Buffalo.
I haven't listened to any Nugent for probably frickin' 40 years.
Well, after we finish recording, your assignment is to go to YouTube and listen to Ted Nugent, Great White Buffalo.
Yeah, it's good.
And let us know if you can get that fingering down.
Wow. Well, you know, I try to pick songs that when I can play one part of it, which is what I'm learning. I'm selecting.
Yeah. Well, I like a lot of Ted songs. It's pretty repetitive, but I love Ted Nugent, and it's one of my favorite songs of all time. And a lot of folks don't know the song, but Great White Buffalo, it's a story, and it's just, it's fantastic. So anyway, so let's get back to this email.
Go ahead.
Anyway, love the podcast and look forward to you guys riding along with me all the time. To this day, I've never seen anything in the woods, but I'm not sure I would enjoy it or not, with 3 question marks. But I always have plenty enough firepower and ammunition. Being an old jarhead, you always make sure you bring enough firepower. Right, Bill?
Yeah.
God bless, and here's to many more great podcasts. You guys are outstanding. Rock on. Well, thanks, Eric, and thanks for your service as a Marine.
The Nugent song that flashes into my head is Stranglehold.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one, too.
You know,
Cat Scratch Fever, Stranglehold, but
yeah.
I'm telling you, my favorite, and I think you're going to love it, is The Great White Buffalo.
That's funny. Well, great mail. And folks, remember, if you should find yourself walking through the woods of Maine, riding down from Binghamton into New Jersey, Minnesota, Canada, remember one thing, my friends. Always carry more gun than you think you're going to need. Sleep tight.